Good morning, folks. So I'm not normally the news guy, right? But we did get some news on the community update yesterday night, and I feel like I've been covering this specifically and very extensively just because of all of the math involved, and it didn't seem right to leave the people who refuse to go to Reddit and read my posts hanging from understanding the whole idea of the update, make good, or whatever else. So let's take a look at that real quick. Meathead posted last night, Friday night. I actually messaged him. I told him I was really upset that he was making me do math on Friday night. He told me I probably shouldn't be doing math on Friday night, and I told him he was wrong and he was dumb. But that's beside the point. It looks as though we're going to be getting a make good for the first day of the new patch. And for those of you who don't maybe understand why that's happening, it's because a lot of us had already done our dailies by the time the first era came out, which locked us out of being able to finish the first era day and kind of screwed us over from getting points, right? And you can kind of see right here what you'll be getting. And it seems to just be a day's worth of points and dailies. And that extra daily is actually relatively nice because those of us that did do our dailies, we already got that portion of it anyway. We really just were locked out of the episode points. Though I do recognize that some people hadn't finished their dailies at all. It also looks like we will be getting 25,000 episode points just because. So it seems like this episode on its own is basically going to be a wash in terms of points and understanding. And hey, listen, I'm not complaining. Now, the part that's important and the reason that I'm doing this update post right now is these adjustments right here. Okay, so first of all, we'll be getting 350 episode points for doing each of our daily quests instead of 300, and it looks like we've redistributed the galactic challenge points across the tiers, front loading things to the lower tiers and lessening the impact on the higher tiers, right? Which is pretty cool. I've done all of the math. I'll show that to you in just a second. Now, before I do that, one thing that I did not mention in my community posts on Reddit and on YouTube that a few people did bring to my attention and I hadn't considered up until that point is not only was there a psychological barrier when it came to this update, there was also kind of like there really wasn't any room for error. And what that meant was that you essentially had to log in every single day in order to get to the point where you could hit that tier 37, right? If you completely ignored GCs. That tier 39, if you just did the super easy marquee GCs. And that tier 43 if you interacted with the system mostly fully, right? Basically, there was no leeway, and if for some reason maybe your internet was out for a day, maybe you're out in the woods for the day, maybe you just forgot because you were busy, those 3,600 points you were losing were devastating. Whereas in the old system, galactic challenges were a 3-day event, which meant that even if you couldn't get to it for a day, you did have some extra time. I will tell you though, there is some good news on this front. So let's take a look at the math. That is the wrong thing. There it is. Right, so I did this post last night, and by the way, I learned that Reddit, if you take this first cell in a column and you don't populate it, right? I figured, it doesn't matter. This one doesn't need to be populated. People know what that is. It completely drops that entire column from your table. And I went to bed last night and woke up to a few people saying, hey, your math is a little bit off. And I realized that complete columns were just gone. So thank you, Reddit. It's all been fixed. Here we're going to look at our dailies. Daily quest completion moves from 300 to 350, which is actually, there are 7 of them in a day. Daily quest stays the same for completing all of them. our total moves from 3,600 to 3,950 for a day, which means that our overall for a month goes from 100,800 to 110,600. That's nearly 3 days of extra points. And what that means is that if you do, for some reason, miss a day, you're not going to be as devastated as you were before. While I don't think I've missed a single day of playing in the 8 or 9 years that I've been playing, I do understand that, people go away, people have busier jobs sometimes than I do, people have more hectic family lives, so I do get that, and this seems to have been built into the system to make things a little bit easier. Now, when we talk about the galactic challenges, you'll see we have the old feats here, per feat, the old per GC, all right, and that old per GC is cumulative, so that means that when we're talking about that, I am stacking the last tier on top of that. And then we have the new and the new per GC. And one thing that I don't think Meathead actually mentioned in his post is that it is more points per GC. It's not just a redistribution of points, right? So instead of 9,100 total, we're going to be seeing 9,450 total per GC in points, and that's a great thing, especially because those redistributed points are largely in these first 5 tiers, right? And I know that there are people saying, well, I don't have Jawas, I don't have Tuscans. The first 6 tiers of GC are not too difficult. These are like the pre-relic tiers. This is where things, as long as you have the team unlocked, even if they're at a lower gear level, they can usually trudge through, right? So for most people, this is a huge deal. I understand if you're in the very early game, you just might not have the team available at all, but this is why we do want to expand our rosters outside of just the most meta teams. Now, when we look at everything together, this is where the fun starts, right? Here's our full breakdown. And we look at the full breakdown, we still need 250,000 points to max to level 50. But we are earning roughly 10% more points from our dailies, right? 110,600. Our episode quests and our episode bonuses are exactly the same. The free marquee feat moves from 4,200 to 5,800 per GC because of that redistribution of points, which means that instead of that 57,000 points after that you needed, you now only need 55,600. And this is a huge deal because we can look at our GC average points to get to level 43, and it shifts from 2,750 to 1,325, right? And the same thing, if we want to completely max, we go from 7,125 to 5,700. Let's kind of look at why that matters. That basically means to get your last Omicron, on average, you just need to hit tier 2 on the Galactic Challenges for those 2 free feats. And that might mean that you just cannot do one challenge in total. Maybe you don't have Tuscans at all. Maybe next time comes up you don't have Jawas at all, right? But next week something comes up that you do have, you're able to get it at a much, much, much higher tier, and that's going to completely wash out your necessity there. That is a huge deal. The same thing with being able to max out the entire battle pass. Instead of needing tier 9, we only need tier 7. I know that some people won't be doing that, but what we do have to remember is that if you're at the lower end and you're struggling to hit tier 7 consistently, it was very unlikely that you were hitting 4 red boxes and 4 gold boxes in a single month. Basically, the majority of players are going to see a huge increase in their ability to get rewards from this game mode. Now, I do understand that psychological, oh my goodness, I can't talk this morning, that psychological barrier still exists. And I get that, and I've messaged about this, and I've put it on Reddit, and I've put it on YouTube, and I do understand that for many players, just seeing something like, hey, you need this battle pass, kind of sucks, especially when you don't have the ability to do those more free tiers. I get that entirely, and I'm still relatively positive that CG is going to put in a few more fixes, but that the fix that they've currently put in is just something that they were able to do quickly and easily without having to change any coding. So basically giving us a little bit of an olive branch and saying, hey, listen, we understand what's going on. Give us some time to fix a few things, but here is something that we can do specifically just by changing the numbers in the system a little bit and not needing to worry that much. Now, with that said, it looks like this GC change is going to come into play when General Syndulla comes out, which basically means we're going to be dealing with the old amount of points for another week after this one currently going on right now. That's okay, because everybody is receiving 25,000 episode points completely for free, right? That should cover it for pretty much all players to make sure that they are hitting where they need to hit without there being too much deal. The final point I want to touch on here is that while I get the idea that people are saying it's more time intensive now, I truly believe that this system is actually less time intensive, and while it does obfuscate the idea of getting the rewards themselves, I do think that as someone who is a veteran player, I now need to put in less effort. I was in the 2 Omicrons and walk away camp because the GC puzzles were never fun. And now, because of this new system, I can pretty much minimally interact with galactic challenges at all and still get my rewards without having to put in too much effort. This store, I do understand the idea that now you have to figure things out on your own. However, depending on where you are in the game, you can completely change what you're getting without having to worry too much. Look at these mods here, for example. They all suck. Nobody would buy any of them. Maybe this just because it has a 5-speed secondary, but nobody in their right mind is buying any of these mods here. Those are all rewards that are now not wasted, and I can use all of that currency on something else, something that I prefer. Where is it? Right? If I want to buy some of my relic materials, I can choose to do that instead. I just so happen to not need anything right now, right? And I can hold that in the back burner. But if I want to, if I feel like it's advantageous to me, I can make that decision. The same thing with Chirotech. You can see, hey, I bought the shock prods. I know it seems silly to say I'm running a little bit low on them at 1900, but I do have about 4 characters that will be going to relics relatively soon, whereas this 2400 is super, like, I'm good on that for a while. Players having more agency is not a bad thing at all. And the other critique being, hey, more Omicrons, more Omicrons, more Omicrons. Why does this store only refresh once a week? Listen, guys, I get it. I would love to spend on only Omicrons from this store. But I also understand that it is a limiting material that they want to keep limited. All that is to say that while I started super positive on this patch, and then I became pretty negative but still logical on the patch, I want to say that right now I am cautiously optimistic about the prospects of the future of this patch. And even though it's very clear that CG wants my money, which, I mean, they're a company that makes sense. We could go into that whole rant about how obviously companies want to make money. Even though that is very clearly happening and the signals are now all there and not just secondhand or like subliminally, I do think that the majority of the developers at CG, maybe not the monetization teams, but the developers themselves, are trying to find the right balance for us. So hold out hope. Don't fall into that negative Nancy, like, I'm quitting, suck my blah, blah, blah bullshit that we're seeing all over the place. I think we're good. With that said, peace out.